Hi, I'm Tom Credland, Head of Corporate Development for Rupert Resources, and I'm joined by Dr Charlotte Seabrook, who is the Group Exploration Manager of Rupert Resources. We're listed on the TSX-V, $1 billion market cap, and the news about us has been really our pre-discovery, which we made 2 years ago, which we took to a maiden resource within 15 months, half the time of the average gold discovery. We're now in the kind of key winter drilling season. We're drilling 80,000 meters in the calendar 2022, having got to the maiden resource at Ikkari on 36,000 meters.
Tom, Charlie, nice to meet you. Good to have you on board. I'm really looking forward to this. Tom, we've spoken in the past for Crux, talking about kind of working in Finland, but Charlie, it's the first time I've spoken to you. I'm really looking forward to getting into the geology, because I know Tom's a geologist, but he's not actually on the rocks the whole time. And Charlie, you've been integral into that process.
Yes, hello. Nice to meet you too.
Hello. Okay, so Ikkari, one of the great discoveries of the last few years, but I haven't quite got my head around the geology of Ikkari yet. Perhaps because I haven't spent enough time on your presentations and on news releases, but what I'm really hoping to do in this next half hour is kind of get a bit of an understanding of what actually is going on in terms of the geology and the extent of the mineralization and how you're going to be tracking it and moving forward. Can you Tom, perhaps can you start with, how you kind of put the package together, and you were instrumental in picking up these licenses. Perhaps you could kind of talk a bit about that before we then move on to Charlie and get a bit more into the kind of the local geology.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll share a picture with our, our sort of land position and a bit about central Finland. Rupert Resources optioned the part of our property in September, in March 2016, and ultimately acquired the part of our property in September 2016. And the amazing thing was, that we had the brownfields part of our mine, but it also came with about 126 square kilometers of ground, right in the central part of the central Lapland greenstone belt. It's becoming better known now, but the key feature is it's a major mineral province. There's around about 40 million ounces of gold equivalent here already, with the Ikkari discovery included now. But you've got kind of potential for orogenic gold and base metals in this sort of this 50-kilometer radius. So it's a very interesting area, comparable to the Eastern Goldfields in Western Australia, or the Abitibi in Canada, or the Birimian in West Africa. So we assembled this land package, and we've added to that over the last 5 years. We're now up to over 700 square kilometers. So it's a continuous winnowing process of picking up ground, evaluating it, and then and obviously you've always got to then end up with drilling things. So
hang on, Tom. Yeah. But Tom, you spotted the kind of the infrastructure around Pautavara, didn't you? Kind of 5 or 6 years ago, even longer.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was an amazing opportunity. When I first came here, it was the part of our mine had been on care and maintenance for some time, since 2014. But it was obvious that the geology was, it was the same geology that you see in all those mineral belts that I've just mentioned. So yeah, there was a unique opportunity, and I think you looked at how it had been explored. There was around about sort of 400,000 ounces of 400,000 meters of drilling in the part of our mine. And there were literally 4 other drill holes probably elsewhere on the 120 square kilometers. So it just hadn't been explored that well. And then you look at some of the historic data that had been and data capture that had been done by were the GTK. Again, there'd been sort of transects of base of till done, but not consistent and not of consistent standards. So there's quite a lot of reasons why discoveries hadn't been made, which you could see. But fundamentally, the geology looked good. You had the right age rocks, 2 billion year old rocks, and a lot of structural complexity which you need to have orogenic gold deposits.
And thanks, Tom. And Charlie, when did you get involved? When did this first come across your radar?
I started with Rupert in late 2018. And essentially it was just before all the regional exploration projects kicked off. So Rupert had done some initial work on assessing the land package from a sort of high level viewpoint. And I basically came in to sort of kick off the on the ground exploration.
Yes, so she's very polite, but she arrived just before all the discoveries were made.
And so those early discoveries, well, the early drilling programs before you selected Ikkari as how did you select Ikkari as original, as an original drill target? What were the kind of the mixture of criteria?
Well, the original programs were actually designed to just assess the potential of the western part of the Pahtavaara permits as a whole. So we managed to define several good-looking base of till anomalies, and using the base of till was our primary strategy. And we had drilled a few drill holes into some of the best-looking ones of those. And we were so impressed by the amount of gold that we kept finding in those early drill holes. We were very successful with that technique, that we wanted to keep pushing on with that to make sure that we weren't going to spend a lot of time drilling things which weren't going to eventually become bigger deposits. So we did try a few and then leave some others behind. Actually, can you just go back to that slide there? So that slide, you can see the yellow dots in the western part of the permit there, with just around Ikkari, and those were the targets that we really started off looking at. But we never got the sense that they were going to be particularly large, particularly quickly. So we just kept on looking, and Ikkari was the 6th. Yeah,
and I think the important thing was that it was the hurdle rate. So they may become great deposits over time, but they didn't hit our initial hurdle rate of this $2 billion NSR, which was kind of like the benchmark we set ourselves, to kind of to get the market excited, to kind of make the exploration worthwhile. We were very ambitious with our targets, which meant that we had 5 very good discoveries, interesting discoveries, but we kept on going until we found something of the right kind of the scale we were looking for. So
the scale and the style of mineralization that we knew was going to host better deposits.
Did you say $2 billion NSR? Was that your kind of target?
Yeah, the revenue, in situ revenue.
But how do you can't judge that off a single drill hole? Do you not work on a kind of a grade thickness kind of calculation first? Do you not say, right, we need to get 100 GT or,
Well, a lot of it was based on the geology of the holes that we were drilling. Some of the earlier holes we were drilling predominantly sulfide-rich gold mineralization, and that's to say sort of massive sulfides with a large component of pyrrhotite and chalcopyrite. And to me, that just didn't seem right to be able to provide, a big deposit that what we wanted to find. We were looking for sort of more classic orogenic gold style mineralization, lots of silica, lots of demonstrations of multiple fluid flow events and big structures.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of where the geologist and the corporate the corporate view maybe diverge. I was we were obviously drilling something very exciting in the region. There was lots of gold in every got bits of gold in lots of drill holes, lots of core which looked quite good. But I guess Charlie was looking for the certain type of plumbing, certain type of host rock, which took us the 6th discovery to kind of get to that kind of thing which we thought would grow. And look, Ikkari, with the first 2 drill holes were drilled, I think probably there was 500 meters of immediately defined 500 meters of strike, and they had these the exceptional widths you see at Ikkari now, these 100-meter widths. That was the thing that sort of set it apart from some of the other stuff, which was kind of tens of meters at a couple of grams. Ikkari was a very different beast, and that came through very, very early.
Well, that's right. It was immediately apparent. The first 4 holes we drilled spanned some 400 meters of strike. So you had four drill holes, that far apart, all intersecting very broad widths of really good looking mineralization with visible gold throughout. That is, clear evidence that you're onto a much better system than some bits of sulfide.
So the visible gold is a nice clue, but when you look through that core now with the hindsight of having the assays in, so what are the kind of geological features that kind of give you that tell you that you're in the system? What speaks to you about these big thicknesses that you're in the system?
Well, there's a large amount of deformation, and it's pretty apparent that there's numerous deformation phases. And one of those is a strong shearing event, which is overprinting everything. So that was a real key thing. The other thing is the way the pyrite is disseminated throughout the whole system. It's not just focused into single veins or a couple of vein areas. It's really disseminated throughout the whole rock. And on top of that, you get this really, really intense alteration and several phases of alteration as well. You can see that there's all sorts of different alterations overlapping. And that really, really speaks of multiple fluid flow events. So you put all that together and you're in a big system.
And the shear, has that acted as kind of the localization for the fluid flow? So has that shearing provided the fluid pathways for the subsequent mineralization?
Well, it's actually a bit more complicated than that. I think the shearing event is definitely part of it. But we also see a sort of later phase of brecciation overprinting everything as well. And I think it's probably the combination of those two different things that's really led to the focusing the gold-bearing fluids where they are.
I mean, you've got in your corporate deck, you've got a cross-section. Could you, Tom, have you got access to that?
I'm trying to
share the screen now.
Share the screen. Here we go. Share the screen. There we go. Just do what I'm told.
So, I mean, it just, what's the driver for this? What's the source of the kind of there we go. That's the cross section that I was looking at. Okay. So you're bounded by the structure. So those black lines are structure. There we go. Faults. Yes.
Yes, and bear in mind that this is really quite a simplified section as well. The geology in reality is a lot more complicated than this. But essentially, you've got a series of subvertical structures, and there is sort of shearing associated with those throughout. And along those structures, you've got rafted blocks of various different mythologies brought up into that system. And that's really what's focused the fluid flow event. But on top of that as well, you get a series of late stage breccias, which have certainly contributed to localizing the gold where it is, and in some cases it certainly seems like they've remobilized some of the gold fluid, and particularly at the contacts of some of those breccias, you get some of the really, really good grades.
Are those cataclastic breccias? I mean, they're structural breccias, or are they hydrothermal, or are there elements of hydrothermal kind of flow in there?
Yes, we actually get a range. We certainly get cataclastic breccias. There's a big one with the contact to that carbonaceous shale that you can see there on the left-hand side of the image. That's a very broken up cataclastic breccia. You get some really, really early cataclastic breccias that are tourmaline rich, and those have been broken, so we think that they're quite an early phase. But on top of all of that, you get these hydrothermal breccias, which are clearly hydrothermal. They cross-cut everything, and they're very subvertical in expression. And those are carbonate rich, and they carry hematite and a lot of disseminated pyrite when they're mineralized.
And I mean, really interesting. Is there a source for the fluids for those hydrothermal breccias?
I do think they're a reasonably late event, and possibly related to dewatering of an adjacent basin or something like that.
Yeah,
but we don't really have any controls on the ages or the timing right now.
And when you look at the so in your resource that you've calculated, the 4 odd million ounces, what are the boundaries like? Is it structurally controlled? Is there kind of a grade? Does it just kind of the vein intensity just drop off outside of the kind of the boundaries of a mineralization? What are your kind of controls on the envelope? Let's put it that way.
Yes, on the north side, it's a pretty sharp boundary. It's controlled by not really just one structure, one main structure, which is a subvertical feature. But then even further on the north of that is possibly a series of smaller subvertical structures, which also host some mineralization. On the south side, we've got less drilling to date so far, but it seems to be a lot more complicated. It doesn't seem to be controlled by one specific structure on that southern contact. It does seem that a lot of the lithologies are folded around there, and some of the alteration shows a similar pattern. So that's a bit more complicated. We're still working through that, but it does suggest that there is potential for more of these zones on the southern contact.
But when you're in the southern contact, you're into the quartzites as well, which may be, so slightly.
Well, we haven't really defined that southern contact of the quartzites very well yet. In actual fact, we really have very few holes through that zone at present that go all the way through. And
you put out your maiden resource in September last year, so there must have been a kind of a drilling cutoff beforehand. What was the rationale behind putting out your resource? Did you think you'd had enough, or had you kind of defined the easy bit at Ikkari? Was there a natural break in the progress of your delineation of this kind of mineralizing system, or was it simply that you thought, well, we've gone far enough, we spent enough money, we better honour the work we've done with a resource?
Look, I think it was very important for us to understand what we had. We knew that we had the critical mass to publish a resource, and we wanted to sort of really set out a baseline of what it was that we discovered. Because the important thing is, when we want to understand the value of the ounces as well, not just, there's no point continuing to find more ounces if you don't know, if you haven't done your metallurgical work, you haven't done sort of your preliminary engineering. So we needed to define a resource to sort of proceed with that work. Just to understand, when you sort of commence with, permitting work and things like that, you need to have kind of constrained, roughly your area, and it didn't preclude us from finding more. It's just, I think we knew we wanted something exceptional, and the thing that differentiates, Ikkari from lots of other deposits is that, we could get to a resource on relatively small amounts of drilling. There are companies that have drilled 200,000 ounces and never published a resource. So it was one of those things with the continuity. It was something that we felt was important, and that useful for investors, useful for shareholders.
But describe the rough geometry of where the resource sits in. It's kind of how much strike length, how much width, and how much depth. Yeah,
I think maybe if I show you, just pull up the long section, which is also in the presentation. If you just let me show you that. So essentially, you have you've got, I guess, 800 meters of strike now, and we've probably drilled it to a vertical depth of about 450 meters. And then, I think the average, the average width is going to probably, 80 to 100 on a sort of true width if you look at it. So it's kind of a big block of mineralized rock, and actually this infill drilling that we're doing now is just is kind of confirming that. I think we published a hole last week, 103 meters at 8 grams, which is quite exceptional. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's not the best intercept we've had, but it's probably when you combine it with the 80 meters at 2.5 grams in the top of that hole, I think that probably is the best hole that we've drilled at Ikkari. So that shows the kind of value of infill. And just, it just shows, you're always trying to understand the value of every ounce rather than just, finding more ounces.
Just if I look at that plan view, bottom right there,
can
you, with your mouse, can you just kind of show roughly where the current resource is?
Yeah, I mean, it's really this kind of red.
It's that blue outline on
the blue outline.
Line.
Yeah, I mean, that's that cutoff. I think is probably 0.2 or something. I think it's on the key, which is but yeah, so you've got obviously got a higher grade component there as well. But if you were to take, I mean, you've got a big lump of 100 million tons of mineralized unconstrained rock, and then within that you've got your close to 50 million tons of stuff which is currently in the resource.
So when what are the expansion? I'm just trying to understand. Just going through, because in that presentation you talk about what is it? 60% of the meters you're going to be drilling this year are going to be at Ikkari. And then of that, it's about 1/3 is infill and 2/3 is expansion. So I'm just trying to understand where that 2/3 of that 2/3 is going to be going. Is that at surface, or is it depth extent? Is it along strike? Is it on all boundaries? Just kind of talk me through where that extra expansion drilling is coming from, because it's a big component of your drill budget this year.
Well, at the moment, the focus of our winter drilling season is in the west of Ikkari, where the ground is a lot wetter. So we really only get good access during the winter months. And that's where we have most of our rigs right now. So we are expanding it to the west. We're also trying to follow up and go deeper at the same time on those successful sections. So that's the first thing. At the same time, we also have some rigs doing deeper holes through the main part of the deposit, as well as deeper holes, particularly in the eastern part of the deposit. And we're gradually going to move from the west as we complete that phase of the program in these sort of midwinter months. Move back towards the east, and making sure we put some deeper holes in along the way to assess the potential. So
it's open long strike in both directions.
Absolutely, yes.
And the depth, and so it's an iterative thing. So it's we'll drill, we'll follow down in one section and just go from known to unknown is kind of the as usual.
Yes, we're just stepping out as we go.
On 50-meter lines.
We're on about 40-meter spacings now. Some of the more aggressive exploration will step out to 80 meters and then back infill to 40 meters. But we're very much we review every drill hole as we drill it and then decide what to do next. We're not drilling to a fixed plan.
And when you say kind of the more aggressive exploration, are you talking about within the kind of the Ikkari target?
That's right. Yeah. Particularly in the east, we're looking at doing a lot more drilling there because it's been very poorly drilled to this date, and we're getting some very high grades from that area as well. So we'll probably put in slightly deeper holes and then infill back towards the previous hole.
The long section you showed had a kind of a slight plunge contingent to that. Does that mean it's does it mean it's closing off along strike? Is it narrowing down, or is it too early to tell?
It does seem that it narrows to the east, but you would have seen in one of our previous releases that even though it narrows, we're still getting very high grades along sort of 20-30 meter thicknesses. So the plunge is still a bit complicated. In reality, Ikkari is split into numerous zones of mineralization, and it does seem like those individual zones may have different plunges in different directions. Oh,
really?
Plunges, yes.
That'll keep you on your toes.
Exactly. So that makes it even more fun. So we really have to assess those as we drill. And as we get results back in. But yes, particularly to the east, some interesting things happen there. But we keep drilling those high grades, which is the key.
And you spoke about having rafts of different material within that kind of shared package. Is there an ability, or is there enough lithological markers? Are there enough lithological markers for you to be able to kind of start to reconstruct kind of a geological package, or to see more preferable host units, or is it too complicated for that?
Well, it certainly is very complicated to join all the bits up together. Whilst we can do a pretty good job on a section by section basis, it's quite hard to join those sections up, with any great success. However, there really is a siltstone unit which actually controls a lot of the mineralization within the overall ultramafic package, and those siltstone units are easy to spot. They certainly contain a lot of the mineralization, and those are the ones that we're really trying to follow.
So when you drill 100 meters at 8 grams a ton, is that across the siltstone package?
Predominantly, yes, and possibly a structurally repeated siltstone package. Okay,
interesting. And then that's a function of permeability and just kind of the competency, perhaps. Is it dissemination, or is it kind of micro? Or perhaps it's hard to at this stage to tell the difference.
It really seems like dissemination in a lot of areas. We do have this very a big block of completely albite altered felsic rock, particularly in the northwest part of the deposit, and that has brittle fracture through it. So the mineralization in that unit is hosted in these sort of micro fractures.
So to find another Ikkari, you are looking for favorable structural zones, perhaps with dilation, perhaps where you've got this kind of the siltstone units, perhaps where you've got intrusions which have been brittle, subject to brittle deformation to kind of create the space. And so that's kind of what you're looking for in the rest of the play areas. Is that fair to say? You'd kind of like another one of those?
Yes, that's right. I mean, the focus is really on structure, and then favorable lithologies after that. But as you know, a lot of most of the region is really covered by thick layers of till, and if it's not covered, well, no, it is all covered by till, but on top of that, you also get these sort of swamp type environments, which cover large areas of ground. So, whilst you can define structures quite well off magnetics or regional geophysics, actually getting down to find which parts of those might be mineralized, or even what rock types that they're made up of, you really need to do the base of till, which we're continuing to do sort of year round. I
think I'll just show this slide now. It's quite informative. This is the kind of base of till profile. So Ikkari had a 200 meter long base of till anomaly, but then you can see the 800 meters of strike that you've got elsewhere on the which is comprised of the Ikkari resource. So you can actually see the base of till, after you've had sort of, I don't know, multiple glacial events, is actually quite small, and actually would have been quite easy to have missed actually with your base of till lines weren't aligned properly, or you hadn't got the kind of the right depth on a couple of holes. So it's
So just talk me through this. So the dark pink, where it's completely blotted out, it's completely opaque. That's the base of till anomaly.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where gold mineralization comes to subcrop beneath the till layer. So that is what you'd have to hit with your base of till drilling in order to actually find the anomaly.
And did you have lines going wherever that is, kind of east-west or kind of northwest, southeast, to cross that base of till? I mean, how many points did you clip it with?
2. And the anomalies were 0.2, 0.1 or 0.2 ppb.
No way! Wow. And that's and that was
0.1 ppm.
0.1 ppm. So that must have been, and that's above background. That's enough of that shouts anomaly to you.
That was just about enough of an anomaly. That wasn't even one of the best anomalies we had nearby in Haina South, where we were drilling before we started at Ikkari. We were getting anomalies of up to 1 gram gold. So it wasn't even a very significant anomaly. However, once we did go back and do infill base of till over those initial Ikkari anomalies, after we put in a drill hole, we did manage to find much higher anomalies along the extent. And
let's just go back to what you're looking for is a kind of a mineralized system which has got multiple events localized in one area, influencing a large area of rock or a large volume of rock, but which is constrained enough not for it to be actually for it to be flushed, but actually contained in a kind of into a concentration which leads to 2.5 grams a ton or something like that. So what are those localizing features? What made it happen there, not 2 or 3 kilometers away?
Well, really these are still early days and we don't have much of a handle on that. We do think that there's a sequence of structural events that have contributed to it, but how we recognize those, we're still not really sure about.
Okay, but then you've got 40% of your drilling going onto regional exploration this year. So you've got you've got a series of targets, and is it just kind of a gradual kind of iterative learning process that you're going to test the combination of like you did at the beginning of Ikkari, but kind of now better informed?
Yes, something like that. We are focusing on big regional structures that we believe to be mineralized, as evidenced by, things like Ikkari or other gold occurrences along them. And we're using Glacial to really, narrow down the search area for which parts of those structures or which intersection of structures is going to be the mineralized one. We obviously have a series of alteration minerals now that we think are probably key. So any evidence of those is obviously moves a certain area up the ranking.
To help you vector in.
Yes, exactly.
What are they?
Well, I spoke about the albite alteration that we see in our block of felsic sediments. We know that albite is a regional alteration feature, but we do think that plays a part in the mineralizing story. Albite alteration is considered favorably. Sericite, not specifically carbonates. The whole area is undergone numerous phases of carbonate alteration on a very, very wide regional scale. So it's quite difficult to distinguish one from the other. So one of the other key features, I guess, would be sericite silica alteration. We think that those are parts of the more juicier parts of the system.
But we try not to overcomplicate it. The best indicator mineral for gold is probably gold in the sort of still sampling. So I've just shown you shared that geological map. That was to really show the importance of still kind of keeping it kind of regional. So we're focused obviously on area 1, which has the 6 initial discoveries, but we have 4 other target areas of that sort of scale and magnitude. So we're not trying to zero in around. We're still looking for satellite potential around Ikkari as part of that program, but as far as the regional campaign goes, we're still looking at kind of big tracts of land with structural complexity, with coincident anomalies is still the goal. So we're going through there's a winnowing process, which we have a pipeline which we're constantly topping up. So I think it's really important not to get too narrow in your focus.
Well, and it's Hannah. Sorry, go on, Charlie.
No, well, just it's all very well to have a model, but if you stick firmly to one model, you may miss other things, which is how we stumbled across Ikkari in the first place.
And I was going to ask about Hannah Central. So that's presumably within your area 1, is that right? And it's 1 kilometre north.
It's just to the north of Ikkari, yes, about 800 meters a kilometre away.
And it's got a copper component.
It does. It's a very different geological expression. It is sulfide dominated, so pyrrhotite, pyrite dominated, with a gold component as well.
But it's not necessarily what you're. It's not the repeat of Ikkari, as you say. It's different geological expression.
That's right, and it doesn't have as much continuity and thickness of the mineralized units.
I think a lot of people would be quite happy with 50 or 60 meters at a kind of if we got a gram and a half of gold and sort of gram and a half of percent and a half of copper. So it's kind of it's quite a it's very pungy. The surface expression isn't very big, but it's one of those things we have to drill it deeper, and we will be in the next couple of months or so. But again, it's just sort of an example of the kind of thing that exists in our in our target areas, and again, it might not light up a base of till map, but it's still this is something you just have to drill, diamond drill.
Yeah,
yes.
Great.
But in reality, it's just another demonstration that the gold mineralizing system is pretty widespread and in along that whole belt.
And just like all greenstone belts, you have different styles of mineralization and deposit. So you've obviously got a different style again at Kittilä, which is further north. That's hosted. That's a little bit refractory. It's double refractory. With an arsenopyrite component, whereas everything at Ikkari is free milling, and it doesn't have those characteristics at all. So you do have this kind of heterogeneity amongst deposits, regionally and actually quite locally as well.
But all part of the same mineralizing system, and I think that's the key thing.
So Kittilä, 45 kilometers north of you, is part of the same age rocks and the same kind of broad suite of controls and fluids.
age of the mineralization has been dated to being a little bit earlier than some of the other ones in the southern part of the belt. But it's in sort of equivalent rocks and of a equivalent sort of age range. So you'd have to assume that it is part of the same bigger overall system.
And in the corporate deck, there's mention of doing a PEA this year. Is that going to be on the back of the existing resource? Or are you going to wait for the data to come through on the kind of all the drilling that you do at Ikkari this year, and then incorporate that, or what's the plan there?
Yeah, I think the cutoff for the Ikkari maiden resource was kind of was drilling done in end of, I think the drilling cutoff was end of May. So we've at the end of the year we sort of done 55,000 meters in total of Ikkari, and I think we're going to do 30,000 meters in the first quarter of this year. So it'll be I guess a big number. So 40,000 meters or so of additional drilling. So but I think we'll this key, the winter drilling season is the key. It's when we're most active. We have the best access. And so that's kind of what we're campaigning now, looking for a cutoff. In the second quarter sometime.
Okay, gotcha. And I noticed that in the resource, you talked about an underground cutoff and an open pit cutoff. So is that the kind of the constrained resource that you mentioned? So you've got the unconstrained resource was 100 million tons of rock, and the constrained resource is whatever it was, the 49 million tons.
Yeah, so they're both they're different. We selected different cutoffs for both. So I think the underground cutoff's 1.2, open pit's 0.6, which is again quite conservative. So there's opportunity. We talked about a bigger mineralized, unconstrained body of rock. There's opportunities to increase the resource just by optimizing the cutoffs, optimizing pit slopes, those kind of things. So in terms of you could look. We did the work on trade-off study on underground versus open pits, and you could probably have mined it as a big open pit, but we felt 2.3 to 1 strip ratio is what we came up with was quite compelling. In terms of it's a much smaller scale operation, but we were very focused on margin, and environmental impact at this point until again we've done that work and understand that properly. So and it didn't make a huge difference to our MPV. So it was kind of I think a lot of companies are very focused on scale, but we're very focused on high value ounces and margin. So I think you could it's a beautiful deposit. You could mine it any number of ways and it would still work. So we
sideways, forward, backwards, sideways, upwards, downwards. But underground, what's the grade at Kittila? Because I know this, we're miles ahead, but I'm just thinking about kind of underground grades. What works, what flies.
Well, Kittila, I think they're sort of 3 to 4 grams, but remember it's double refractory, so I think they develop a large number of stopes every year. Maybe I think 200 stopes a year. So they mine it really well. But then you've got a big autoclave and it's double refractory. So it's a very you've probably got to subtract some grade for that sort of technical complexity.
Yes, the economics would be quite different.
The economics are quite different, and they're down at sort of I think 1,500 meters depth. So it's a very different. It's a very different. You can compare, productivities and certain costs, but it's quite a different profile.
And what does your petrography say so far, or even your metallurgy? What is the gold hosted in?
It's all associated with pyrite. It's either as free gold or associated with the pyrite. There's very little actually within, enclosed by the pyrite itself. It's all pretty easy to get out with a small grind.
Yeah, I think the grind at the moment, I think we said we can get to a pretty good liberation on about 120 odd microns. So it's a very coarse grind, and then you can very favorable mass pull. So you can get a lot of gold out on a very coarse grind, which will help with in terms of energy consumption and things. It's got a lot of advantages from a metallurgical perspective. You can then, upgrade the concentrate produce a float concentrate quite early on, which again means that your back end is much smaller. So I mean, I think
you have arsenic in the mix,
and there's no deleterious sediments at all. There's no arsenopyrite.
And it's acid, and it's neutralizing in terms of the waste rock as well, which is very helpful. So
that's right. There's so much carbonate in the system that it automatically buffers itself.
Oh, nice. I wonder what I was going to ask you about that. Somewhere in the presentation, you talk about 4,000 to 14,000 tons per vertical meter. Why such a big range?
Well, I mean, some of it's a function of drilling density in that upper part. So again, as we, I think if you look at the drilling density and you look at the gram, the grade, the ounces per vertical meter, it does drop off with drilling density at about sort of 300 meters. We don't know if that's a real thing until we've got more drill holes down at that depth as well. But there's no real there's no particular reason for it other than there's just more drilling at surface. Although that's where you want your ounces per vertical meter, isn't it? So it's again a good problem to have. But I think this is the exciting thing. This is where we will start to drill these depth extensions in the first quarter. So it's a very very exciting time to be on site. So it's kind of we're looking forward to the drilling for the next couple of months.
And there's one bit I didn't understand at the back of your preso. You talked about the market cap and price over the NAV ratio in your peer comparison. I think we're not. I think we don't. I think you talk about sort of PNAVs, and I mean, it's a bit of a corporate thing. But you've seen the PNAV, the price to valuation, price to net asset value for the sort of higher quality assets. You've seen recent M&A for the sort of potential mines in first world jurisdictions with kind of access to infrastructure, with existing mines in the region. You're seeing kind of premiums, I guess, to some of the other discoveries. So I think that's an important point to make. Is I think if you're obviously if you make a great discovery, then you may have a company making discovery. But we're thinking about this. We think this asset would improve anybody's business in terms of both economic and and non sort of financial metrics. It's kind of has lots of advantages. And just when you get to calculate your NAV, how did was that based on a resources per a value per ounce for inferred resources, or was it on an internal
so
NPV?
That's a consensus NAV. We haven't floated our own internal NAV out there. Okay. So it's kind of, I think it's three analysts. So it's consensus NAV, and they've done the work. That's the benefit of having a resource out there, is that you then people are able to model this and give you an economic a DCF rather than just valuing on an in situ dollars per ounce kind of multiple. They can sort of put some economics around it.
Great. And one final question. Remind me of the Agnico Eagle holding in Rupert. What do they own?
Currently have just a bit below 10% on an outstanding basis, and then they have warrants to get them to just a bit below 15%, which we can ask them to exercise in this month actually. So as long as the shares are above $1, which I hope they will be. In a couple of weeks' time.
I'm sure hopefully they'll be above $6. Good. Good. What have I missed? What else do we talk about?
Well, I think it's just really early days. I mean, Ikkari was only discovered. I think the first drill hole in Ikkari probably went in about this time 2 years ago. The first holes in Area 1 typically went in the first quarter as well. So, I think we're obviously working. Expect loads more news flow, loads more drill results, and then there's always the possibility we may make another discovery as well, which would be another Ikkari. So I think there's lots going on. I mean, in terms of productivity levels, we've got 3 times the number of rigs going this year than we did last year. And obviously we understand the geology more every day. So I mean, I think we're in good shape. Oh, and we've got $50 million, close to $50 million of cash in the bank.
Right. Well, then it's over to you, Charlie.
Well, just to follow up on what Tom has been saying, we are very busy at Ikkari, and that program is going tremendously well. But at the same time, we are busy at some of these other areas. We're doing further drilling at Haina Central. We're doing further drilling at Haynes South, and we are expecting, good things to come out of that, especially, demonstrating potential as satellite deposits of Ikkari. But at the same time, we are doing more of the complete grassroots exploration. So the base till rig is continuing to give us new anomalies, which we're going to test in the next couple of months as well.
Great. Then it is literally over to you, over to you both to continue the news flow for the year. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed getting the update.
Thanks, Merlin.
Thank you.